Hello, I'm Sasan Kasravi. This is Proteus Debate Academy. We make high-quality coaching resources for debaters and their coaches. And I've been doing a series of videos specifically for coaches on coaching. This is a continuation of that. I'm actually judging at a tournament right now, which means this might be one of the rare videos which we knock out in the first take. Otherwise, I'm not going to have enough time before the next round needs to start. I wanted to talk about personal objectives for debaters, which I think is a really important topic, but also gives us some fun material to talk about, which might not start out how you're expecting. A little bit of lag there. Hopefully that's not a problem. So when you start coaching, right, you're going to run into a problem where you ask students like what they feel they need to improve on. And the most common response is some vague non-answer. They don't really know where it is they need to improve. The second most common answer, and I think the two of these will make up 90% of all responses, is like their confidence, like especially when they're starting out. Maybe they can be more specific and say like not freezing up, or I want to know more about the topic. I want to ask questions better or answer questions better. There's a lot of issues with these though. First, I guess let's go in reverse order. Asking and answering questions is one of the hardest skills in debate because it requires you to understand everything else that's going on in the debate in order to be able to do it well. There's a couple pointers I can give and have given in videos we've made about questions that you don't need to like have a full top-down view of the round in order to be able to implement some basic, best practices. But generally speaking, to be good at questioning, you need to be good at everything else first. Prep and topical knowledge. Well, if you're doing Congress or Parley, the topic changes all the time, so that's not a useful way of spending your time. And even if you're doing like LD or PF, I just don't think that that's really, I think students are more likely to think it's a bigger deal than it actually is. And then as far as like confidence, not freezing up, whatever, all that stuff, like they don't really have a clear idea of what they need to do in order for that not to happen. And honestly, it just comes with doing rounds a lot anyway. It gets figured out. So how do you figure out what you want your students to do? Well, I am going to talk about video games. Debate is a game, and I have a whole video, at least one video, talking about like game design and debate and what we can take away from game design. And my basic thesis here is that people will acknowledge that debate is a game, but they don't really think about the role game design plays in debate, both in how we design the activities, but also how we approach coaching and getting better. But I think it's a huge part of it, and I think we stand to gain a lot from looking more at games, video games, and, other non-video game games. So I want to talk about a deathmatch. That is a first-person shooter where you're playing a game, and the object of the game is to shoot the other people, and when I'm describing this, it sounds more intense than it actually is. But from a game standpoint, right, this is a zero-sum game, right? The winner is the one that kills the most other players while dying the fewest, right, times. But although not actually, but generally speaking, that's what ends up happening. So, for example, you'll see here, this player had more deaths. Like, they usually have more deaths than the players below them. But generally speaking, if you're dying, somebody else is getting the point for that kill, which puts them ahead of you, right? So the only way a winner here is measured is who gets the most kills. This is the way first-person shooter competitive online matches used to be. This is Unreal Tournament, but it was that way with Doom. It was that way with Quake. It was that way from basically when the genre existed, from the mid-90s through to the early 2000s. What ended up happening later, around, my understanding is Halo 2, 2004, they started introducing like server-based online competitive matches. So if you wanted to play Unreal Tournament, there is no server for the game. Someone is literally like making a phone call to your internet, and then you play together. And because of that, anyone can just leave at any point. There's no consequences to anything. And the people who are like, who own the game and are running the game have no idea what's going on in there because they're not involved at all. It's just a direct message between these two players who own a copy of the game. So there's no way to moderate it. There's no way to, for example, have a rating system. But then consoles wanted to do this. And in order for video game consoles to have online matches like this, they needed to incorporate some changes, and that it created some new opportunities. So this is Halo 2, and in Halo 2, you'll see here on the right that people have like a level. So in this match, everybody is randomly assigned to a match, and once you're gone, you'll just randomly be assigned to some other match, but nothing you do in that match affects anything ever in another match. Here, they decided, okay, we're going to give somebody a name. That name is going to stay persistent while they're playing the game, and every time they win, they get a few amount of points for winning, and even when they lose, they get some points. They get lesser points. But that does a bunch of things, right? That allows the people to get like a level indicating how good they are at the game, or at least how long they've been playing. And then people with high level can get matched against high level, people low against low. It makes the matches a little bit more fair and makes people less likely to quit because they are losing too fast. It also makes people less likely to quit in the middle of a match because you may as well finish out the match because you still get some points. I got a ballot for the next round, but we have 20 more minutes. I think I can get through this in 20 minutes. So the downside of this is eventually you reach a skill level where everyone in your skill level is around your skill. Like right now, I'm playing Tekken, right? I am in the blue ranks, and that means every time I play, I win about 50% of my matches because everyone's kind of around the same skill level as me, and I'm not really doing anything to improve, and I'm not sure what I should be doing to improve. So right around that same time, around 2004, a game comes out called World of Warcraft, and it's massively popular. And every video game corporation is looking at it and thinking, how can we get this money? So World of Warcraft is an RPG, a role-playing game. And the whole point of a role-playing game is that you create your own individual character, which has your own individual traits, and then you navigate a world in which other people are their own unique individual people, right? But one of the things that people found out from the success of World of Warcraft is when you have your own individual player and you have to level up that player, that drives up engagement a ton. So people aren't just picking up the game, setting it down, and then a month buying another game. I personally know people who are still playing World of Warcraft on the same character since like 2007. So the game makes a ton of money, and people are engaged with the game. They're playing it for a really long time, and other games are trying to figure out how do we incorporate this level of, like, frankly, addictiveness, but also, like, the sense of progress that creates that addictiveness into other genres of games, right? And so there's this idea that whatever the first-person shooter game is that can combine World of Warcraft style progression and customization with a first-person shooter is going to make a cajillion dollars, right? And that really is the same challenge that we have in debate. So what we want, right, we're trying to solve the same problem. We have a game where when we send somebody to a tournament, one person can win that tournament. One team can win that tournament. And if all that matters is winning or losing, then almost everyone in our activity is failing all the time, but at least 50% of people are failing any given match, right? How do we instead change it so that people feel rewarded for every single round, right? That there's some sense of progress being made even if they don't win. And there's also like the issue of if you're basing your sense of progress and performance on how the round went. Actually, let me just accept this ballot real quick. That's what you're supposed to do. If you're basing your sense of progress and accomplishment on how the round went, you get really inconsistent results. Maybe you got a really good opponent and you did do a better job than you have before, but you lost. Or maybe a judge just made a random decision. Or maybe you didn't do a good job. You've gotten complacent and lazy, but the person you debated against is worse than you, and so you ended up winning. Or the judge randomly gave you the win and you didn't deserve it, right? So you can see we're trying to do the same thing that the first-person shooter genre is trying to solve. It's a zero-sum game, but you're trying to figure out how do we make it so that it's engaging even when you're losing, and there's specific ways of making progress. If you've been playing video games since 2007, you probably know the solution that Call of Duty... Oh, hold on. Oh, yeah. Right. So we want a system that tells people, one, where they came up short, whether they won or lost, like in their strategy, in their effort, whatever. We want to reward what they did well. We want to give a sense of success. I already talked about all that. Let's get into it. In 2007, Call of Duty Modern Warfare came out, and they had a really, really smart solution to this. They introduced challenges, and what challenges are a bunch of things that you are asked to do in a match that have nothing to do with whether your side wins or loses the match. So it's, hey, get 3 kills with this weapon. Or you can see in this screenshot here, fall 15 feet or more and survive. Run for this long. Use this weapon, right? It doesn't matter if you win or lose. The points that you get from doing those things in the match vastly outnumber the points that you get for even winning the match, right? So why is that beneficial? One, it creates a unique set of personal objectives, right? You have different people in the match trying to do different things, which makes the game more interesting from like a gameplay standpoint, but it also players feel a significant sense of progress even if they win or lose, right? So now you're no longer bound to this, like, at least 50% of people need to fail. It's now possible for 100% of your players to succeed in the same match because 100% of your players can, in theory, accomplish the challenges that they have for that match. Now, they might not all succeed, but it's now possible for them to. The other thing is that there's a limited number of objectives that they have at a time. So, for example, there might be like daily challenges or something like that. But also there's like, you start to do the challenges and you've done all the easy ones, or the ones that are for the weapons that you already like to use. And now if you want to keep leveling up and unlocking stuff, you have to start doing some new stuff. You don't just get to like choose what your challenges are. Based on how you like to play, there are, at a certain point, just these are the things you have to do to keep progressing. And that gets people to step out of their comfort zones. And you still have, like, wins and losses there, but instead of it being, like, the actual reward or the actual sense of progress that students get, the wins and losses just exist so that people are getting balanced matchmaking, right? So that they're competing at a level where they aren't just getting completely blown out of the water or just really easily stomping on everybody. This is how every competitive online zero-sum game works now, with very, very few exceptions. But certainly this is how every, like I'm sure Fortnite does this. I'm sure every modern shooter does this. So how do we implement this into debate? Well, first, students need to play the game. They need to debate. They need to go to at least one competition, but one is enough. From there, what you need to do is do ballot review with students. Maybe I'll make a separate video specifically on how to do ballot review. But they need to come away with 2 to 3 specific objectives for their next competition or their next practice round or their next whatever, right? But these aren't like, this is what I'm going to work on. This is, in my next round, what will define success, right? Not winning or losing. Success will be defined by whether I have done these 2 or 3 things in that round, win or lose. Those objectives must be entirely under the control of the students. So it can't be something that's based on the result of the round. It has to be something that they have under their control. I'll give you some examples, but it's important for them to be extremely specific. So it shouldn't be something like ask good questions. Like, how will they objectively know whether the questions they asked in that round qualified as good or didn't qualify as good, right? And it has to be rooted in something that the judge put on an existing ballot. The reason for that is because that is our auditing mechanism for making sure that what we're asking the student to work on is something that actually has an impact on the rounds they're in, and you can measure the impact quickly, right? A student might want to work on something that just isn't coming up in their rounds, and so how do you know if they're improving or not, right? Instead, you look at what are the most common reasons you are losing, and then can we come up with these are the things you must do in these rounds? You might keep losing, but are you doing these things that we think are going to prevent you from losing? So here's some bad objectives for reference, right? Like, be more confident. That's too vague. How do we measure that, right? Win 2 rounds, get a speaker award. That's based on circumstances that aren't under your control. Ask better questions. There's no specific analysis here of like what's bad about your questions. So maybe you can there's a reflection. Oh, it's a white hair. I kept thinking there was something on my nose. So what is it about your questions that are bad, and what is something you can do to make the question good? And that should be the goal, right? Ask this kind of question rather than just saying ask a better question, and have better impacts, like same situation. So what are some good objectives that people can have instead? On the left column, those are some basic, I've just started doing debate. Use your full speech time, right? You are a new novice debater. As your coach, what I want you to do is I want you to go into the next practice or go into the next debate round, and I want you to use your full speech time. I don't want you to care about anything else that's going on. If you do that, you will have succeeded and we'll come up with another goal. If you don't accomplish that, no worries, but this goal is not changing until you've done it. And maybe it stays the goal for a while. So maybe it stays on that list of 2 or 3 things I need to do in this debate round until it's just automatic for me. Ask 3 questions. Pause before speaking when I'm not sure what to say, right? These are things that a debater should be able to ask themselves after a round, did I do this or not? And it should be easy to audit as somebody watching the round. Did they do that or not? Compare my impacts to my opponents, right? Doesn't mean I'm going to win. Doesn't mean that I did a great job, but it just, did I do that thing or not? Cite 4 speeches. On the right are what these objectives might look like when you you're more of an intermediate debater, right? Read offense against every position. That means for every argument they have proposed, I came up with one reason why that actually makes things worse, right? I read a turn. That's an example of offense. Read all 7 answers to T. That's topicality. We have another video, Paul, talking about when somebody reads a topicality. There are 7 answers that you need to read in this order. Did you get all 7? Not all of them will be as good as they could have been, but can you, in 1.5 minutes after somebody reads a topicality, find a way to work in all 7 of these answers? Have a fully fleshed out case ready in prep, right? that's more of an intermediate thing, right? Manage to read the topicality that you need to read in your round in less than 90 seconds. These are good examples of objectives, and you work your way up through these. And I think that is a really important tool for debaters to not only have like goals driving what they're specifically working on, but also in order to maintain engagement, because it creates a game within the game that is completely separate from winning or losing and is much, much more under their control than winning or losing. Is the next thing this flowchart? No. So how do they help? I already mentioned they should only have 2 or 3. Sense of progress, just talked about all that. It shifts focus away from things that, so I've talked before about, like in my less feedback video, that debaters tend to prioritize working on the wrong things. This sort of like forces them out of that. It's rooted in actual judge decisions. That's always really good. And it gets debaters to think carefully and specifically about what they should be doing rather than like, my questions should be better. They're forced to engage with the question, what will I do in my next round which will make my questions better? At the point of forcing your students to think about where they need to improve specifically enough, you don't even actually need to know the answers. Like, they will just come to the point where they're like, okay, I need some way of answering this sort of counterplan. I don't know how to do it when that comes up. Then they will seek out that answer and find it. It's very easy to find answers to debate questions when your questions are really specific. We have a separate video on like asking specific questions, right? When you know what you need to do, or you know what your question is specifically enough, you can find the answer really quickly, right? As a coach, your job isn't to know all of the answers to these incredibly niche and specific questions. It's to guide your students to finding out what those questions are for them. They'll find the rest on their own. And this is what I'm going to talk about in, I think, probably the next video, which ties into that, right? It's just this idea of like, how do we actually improve at debate? You compete a lot, and then you try to figure out, why did I lose? If you don't know why you lost, you get some feedback until you do. If you do know why you lost, you're like, okay, do I know how to not lose in that scenario, right? If I could run this back again, could I not lose? And if you can't not lose in that way again, you seek out instruction on what to do. You practice that until you have it. If you do know, you just do that thing. There's a scenario in which I'm giving you the whole video that I'm going to give you later, but I'll explain it more later. But there's people who are like, oh, well, I shouldn't have lost. In which case, like, that's its whole own thing. I have to go judge this round, but I just wanted to get a video out on a Sunday. You are all lovely, as far as I know. Thanks so much, and have a good day.